Why are you still here? The CEO snapped. The single dad's answer made her cry. They laughed when Thomas Reeves showed up to the building at 7:50 on a Tuesday morning with a child's lunchbox tucked under his arm. Russell Holt looked at Marcus Chen across the reception desk and said it loud enough for the front desk staff to hear. They're letting the daycare crowd into strategy now. God help us. The 33rd floor of Langford Group was the kind of floor that started early and ended late and considered both things virtues. Russell Holt was 44, Deputy Director of Organizational Strategy. The kind of man who had concluded early in his career that the best way to remain indispensable was to be the last one standing, outweighting, outlasting, out-enduring everyone around him in a competition no one else knew they were in. He had been at Langford Group for 7 years. He had outlasted 3 directors, 2 restructures, and 1 merger. He was still standing. He intended to keep standing. Thomas Reeve was standing at the front desk, returning his visitor badge, because he had just delivered the lunchbox his daughter Ella had left on the kitchen counter that morning, driven it across the city in his break between drop-off and his first meeting, and was now about to take the elevator down and walk 4 blocks to his actual job. He had been at Langford Group for 6 weeks, a junior strategy analyst, contract position, the kind of role that paid the bills during the year after a divorce that had rearranged everything. He was wearing a jacket that had a small ink mark on the left cuff that he had tried to get out with a wet cloth that morning and had not entirely succeeded. The front desk coordinator, a young woman named Priya, looked at the lunchbox. She had a daughter of her own. She smiled at Thomas without any performance in it. Russell laughed. Marcus Chen smiled. What Russell Holt did not know was that Thomas Reeve had spent 4 years before this role as a senior partner at Meridian Strategy Group, had overseen 3 of the 5 largest organizational restructures in the sector, and had a client list that included 2 of Langford Group's current accounts. What he didn't know was that Thomas had taken the junior contract role because the senior positions all required travel. And he had a 6-year-old who had lost the family routine 6 months ago and needed her father present in the specific way that meant home by 5:30. No exceptions. No business dinners. No Tuesdays in another city. What none of them knew was that the new CEO of Langford Group, Helena Marsh, who had been in the role for 38 days, had read Thomas's application twice, had noticed the unexplained step down from senior partner to junior contract, had not asked about it yet, was about to. By the end of this week, Russell Holt would be in a meeting with Helena and HR that he had not anticipated and would not enjoy. Marcus Chen would be looking for a reference from someone other than Russell. And Helena Marsh, who had been running at a speed that was breaking something she hadn't found the name for yet, was going to ask a question at 9:15 on a Tuesday night that she expected to be a dismissal, and receive an answer that would stop her completely. But first, Thomas needed to pick up Ella at 5:30, and it was only 8 a.m., and there was a day to get through. 7 hours earlier, Thomas had been awake at 5. Not the alarm, the dream. He'd been having the same one since the divorce. The house on Aldwell, the kitchen table, Claire across it. In the dream, they were talking normally, the way they'd talked before it went wrong, before the slow divergence that had taken 4 years to complete and 3 months to finalize. He always woke from it the same way. Not sad, exactly, but with the specific quiet of something that had been resolved and still left a sound. He had stopped fighting the 5 a.m. He made coffee. He stood at the window. The apartment was the right size for 2, him and Ella, who slept 3 nights a week here and 4 nights at Claire's, a schedule they'd negotiated with the mediation patience of 2 people who had failed at being married and were determined not to fail at being parents. It was working mostly. Ella had the bedroom with the window. He had the couch for the first 2 weeks until the second bed arrived. He had not told Ella about the couch. She had found out anyway, through the deductive process she applied to all information, and had said only, "You should have just taken the bedroom, Dad. I don't care about the window that much." He had not taken the bedroom. She was asleep when he checked at 5:15. She slept with one arm thrown over the edge, which she'd done since she was 2 and which he had stopped trying to adjust because the arm always went back. She had a school project due Thursday, a diagram of a local ecosystem, and had been working on it with the focused pleasure of a child who found systems interesting. The diagram was on the desk. He could see it from the doorway. It was good. He made her lunch at 5:30. Ham, apple, the specific crackers she liked that he had been to 3 stores to find the week they'd moved in. He wrote a note on a napkin. "Ecosystem diagram looks great. Save some of those crackers for Thursday presentation. Dad." He went to get ready. He was out the door at 7:15, Ella's backpack over one shoulder, his own bag over the other. At the school gate, she hugged him with the focused completeness of a child who had learned to make goodbyes count. She had been doing this since October, since the move, with a consistency that he had come to understand was her version of making sure. He stayed until she was through the door. He got to the car. He found the lunchbox on the passenger seat. He looked at it. He looked at his watch. He looked at the route to Langford Group. He drove to Langford Group. The 33rd floor ran at full speed from 8 a.m. The strategy team had a standing 9 o'clock that Thomas had been attending for 6 weeks, with the attentiveness of someone learning the room. He had learned it thoroughly, who had what, who wanted what they didn't have, which projects were moving and which were stalled by politics rather than complexity. He had learned Russell Holt specifically. He had been learning Russell Holt since week 1. Russell operated through a system of implied hierarchy that had nothing to do with the org chart. He scheduled the first meeting of the day so that latecomers were visible. He used the phrase "as we discussed" to reference conversations that had not included the person he was speaking to. He gave junior analysts detailed direction and then expressed surprise at the direction when it produced the expected outcome. He had been doing this for 7 years with the precision of someone who had turned it into muscle memory. Thomas had watched all of it. He had not reacted to any of it. He had done his work. At 9:03, Russell had looked at the lunchbox under Thomas's arm and delivered the daycare line for the morning. By 9:15, the lunchbox was at the front desk and Thomas was in the meeting. At 11, Russell assigned Thomas the quarterly efficiency review, a project that was 3 weeks of work with a deadline of Friday just to see how he handles scope. Russell said to Marcus afterward, with the satisfied expression of a man who had set a well-placed trap. Thomas said yes. He said yes the way he said yes to everything on this floor, without drama, without visible calculation, with the simple acknowledgement of someone who had decided to understand the work before deciding how to feel about it. He started the review at noon. He went through the source data, the previous report, the methodology. By 2 o'clock, he had found 3 structural issues in the previous analysis that had been producing systematically optimistic output. He noted this. He kept working. At 5:15, he packed up. 5:20, elevator. 5:34, school pickup, 4 minutes late. Which Ella noticed and recorded without comment. At home, dinner, ecosystem diagram, bedtime at 8:30. He read the last chapter of her current book, which involved a girl who discovers that the adults around her have been looking at the wrong data and draws a diagram to prove it. After Ella was asleep, Thomas sat at the kitchen table with the efficiency review open on his laptop. He worked until 11:30. He went through the structural issues methodically, documented them, built a correction framework, and ran the revised numbers. He saved the file. He did not submit it yet. He wanted to look at it again in the morning. He put Ella's lunchbox in her backpack for tomorrow. He went to sleep. Wednesday passed. Thursday passed. Thomas worked the review in the mornings before the floor filled up, and in the evenings after Ella was asleep. He fixed the 3 structural issues. He found a 4th. He built a methodology addendum. He had, by Thursday night, a report that was significantly better than the scope Russell had assigned. Not because he was trying to prove something, but because the problems were there and he could see them. And leaving them was not how he worked. On Friday, Russell appeared at his desk at 3 p.m. "The review?" Russell said. "Where are we?" "Done," Thomas said. Russell picked up the printed draft. He read the first page. He looked up. The previous methodology was cleared by the senior team last year. "I know," Thomas said. "The issues I found are in the addendum. You can take them or leave them. The core deliverable is complete." Russell looked at the addendum. He had the expression of a man who was expected to come to a trapping, and found instead that the trap had been turned around and is being politely offered back. "This wasn't the assignment," Russell said. "The core assignment is on pages 1 through 11, Thomas said. "The addendum is separate. You don't have to include it." Russell stood with the report for a moment. Then he put it down on Thomas's desk. "I'll review it over the weekend," he said. Thomas nodded. He went back to his screen. What happened over that weekend? Russell read the addendum. He took out the first error, the one most visible to a casual reader, and put it in a slide deck with his own name in the footer. He sent it to Helena Marsh on Sunday evening as a proactive quality note on the quarterly review. He did not mention Thomas. Thomas found out Monday morning when the slide deck appeared in the team channel with Russell's name on it. He looked at it for a moment. He recognized his own calculation and his own correction language. He made a note of the date, time, and file name. He got to work. Helena Marsh had been CEO of Langford Group for 43 days. She had come from Vance & Partners, where she had spent 11 years and had not stopped moving for most of them. She was 45. She had come to Langford for the scale, a genuinely large organization with genuinely hard problems that would require everything she had. She had been right about the scale and the problems. She had not been prepared for how completely they would consume everything. She was sleeping 5 hours and eating at her desk, and had not been to the gym since week 2, and had developed a specific pain in her right shoulder from the angle of her monitor that she had been ignoring for 3 weeks. She had a younger brother she hadn't called in 11 days. She had a plant on her office windowsill that was dying because she kept forgetting to water it. She was not managing. She was executing. There was a difference she had once understood and had lost track of somewhere in week 3. On Tuesday evening, the Tuesday of Thomas's 6th week, she was in her office at 9 p.m., with the floor largely emptied. She had 3 more things before she could leave. She had been telling herself that for 2 hours. She heard a sound from the floor, the keyboard rhythm of someone working. She looked through the glass wall. At a desk in the middle section, not near the window, not in a visible position, Thomas Reeve was typing, monitor on. Coffee beside the keyboard, jacket off. He had been there at 8 a.m. She had seen him in the morning stand-up. She had not thought about him since, and he was still there at 9 p.m. And he had the focused, unperformative quality of someone who was not staying late to be seen staying late. She opened her office door. She walked to the floor. She stopped at his desk. "Why are you still here?" she said. She said it the way you say things when you're tired and it's 9 p.m. and you've run out of careful. Clipped. Not unkind, but not kind. The voice of someone who has been asking questions all day and is asking one more. Thomas looked up from the screen. He looked at her. Not startled, not deferential. The steady look of a man who had been asked a real question and was deciding whether to answer it, really. My daughter had a project due Thursday, he said. Ecosystem diagram. I've been helping her after bedtime and working after that. The quarterly methodology has 3 systemic errors that are going to produce a bad recommendation in Q2 if nobody corrects them. I found them last week. I'm correcting them. He paused. And I stay because the work needs doing and my daughter is asleep and the building is quiet, he said. This is the only time it's quiet. Helena looked at him. There was something in the answer that she had not expected. Not the professional part, the structural errors, the correction, the competence. She had read his application. She had looked at his work file. She knew about the competence. It was the other part. My daughter had a project due Thursday. I've been helping her after bedtime. This is the only time it's quiet. She stood at his desk. The floor was empty around them. The city was visible through the windows, doing its nighttime thing, lights and movement and the particular, anonymous life of a city at 9 p.m. She thought about her brother she hadn't called in 11 days, about the plant on the windowsill, about the shoulder that had been hurting for 3 weeks that she kept forgetting to address because there was always something more urgent. She thought about when she had last been somewhere quiet. She couldn't remember. Her jaw moved. Her eyes, which had been dry for most of the day, were not. She was not a crier. She had not cried in a professional context in 11 years. She was not performing anything. There was no one to perform for. It was just that the answer had arrived in the exact shape of the thing she had not known she was looking for. And it had found the part of her that was tired enough to stop holding everything in place. She pressed her fingertips to the corner of her eye. She looked at the ceiling for 2 seconds. Thomas looked at her. He did not look away. He did not perform, not noticing. He just waited. With the patience of a man who understood that some silences were someone thinking, and some were someone needing a moment, and that both deserved to be left alone. She breathed. How long have you been finding errors in the quarterly methodology? She said. Her voice was steady, just slightly rough at the edges. Since week 2, he said. Why didn't you bring it to me? I didn't know if the errors were intentional, he said. Some organizations run optimistic models because the outcome requires it. I needed to understand whether I was looking at a problem or a policy. And? Problem, he said. Definitely a problem. She looked at the screen. Can you send me the full correction file tonight? Yes, he said. She looked at him for a moment. The report Russell sent me Sunday evening, she said, with the methodology note. Thomas looked at the screen. He said nothing. Was that yours? She said. He met her eyes. The calculation was mine, he said. The slide deck is his. She was quiet for a moment. Send me everything, she said. The original files, dates, timestamps. I'll send it when I'm done here, he said. She nodded. She was about to turn when he said quietly, not performing anything. Go home. She looked at him. The shoulder, he said. You've been adjusting the monitor angle every 20 minutes since this morning. It's not the monitor. It's the chair height. He paused. And there's a plant on your windowsill that needs water. She looked at him for a long moment. I have 3 more things, she said. They'll be there in the morning, he said. And there'll still be 3 things. She stood at the edge of his desk. The city through the windows, the empty floor, the particular quality of a 9 p.m. Tuesday, when everything that had needed doing for 16 hours was still not done, and the shoulder hurt and the plant was dying. And someone at a desk in the middle of the floor had just said the true thing without any agenda attached to it. "What's your daughter's name?" she said. "Ella," he said. "How old?" 6. She looked at the desk, at the coffee cup that had been there since before she'd walked over, at the jacket on the back of the chair and the screen with the correction model, and the man who had been here since 8 a.m. and was going to be here until the work was done, and had told her why in a sentence that had changed the quality of her evening. "Good night, Thomas," she said. "Good night," he said. She went back to her office. She watered the plant. She shut down her computer. She got her coat. She stood at the office door for a moment. She thought about the shoulder, about the brother, about the plant, about what it would take to be somewhere quiet, and how long it had been. She went home. The files arrived in her inbox at 11:42 that night. She read them in the morning, at her kitchen table with coffee before the day started. She read all of them. The original quarterly document, the version history showing Thomas's corrections time-stamped across 5 evenings, the addendum in full, and the Sunday slide deck from Russell with its single lifted calculation in a footer bearing his name. She had 3 back-to-back calls starting at 8. She took all 3. Between the second and third, she texted her brother. She adjusted her chair height. She looked at the plant. It was still alive, recovering. At 2 p.m., she called HR Director Sandra Oaks and Russell Holt into her office. The meeting lasted 31 minutes. She showed Russell the version history the same way a fair person shows evidence, clearly, without theater, letting the document speak. She named what had happened. She named what the standard required. She named what would happen next. Russell attempted 3 things: context, which she let him finish; precedent, which she addressed directly with 2 counterexamples; and an implicit suggestion that Thomas had misrepresented the timeline, which she closed with the metadata. "This is your second documented instance of attribution misrepresentation," she said. "The first is in your file from 2 years ago, which I reviewed last week." She paused. "The review process will begin Monday. Until then, the quarterly report goes to the team under Thomas's name with a methodology correction credit." Russell left her office and did not make a comment to anyone on the floor. Marcus Chen, who had laughed at the daycare comment on Tuesday morning, had the instincts to read the room. He said nothing. Sandra Oaks began the formal review process Monday morning as instructed. By the following Friday, the formal review had concluded. Russell Holt had been offered a restructured role, client coordination, not strategy oversight, a lateral move that removed his ability to manage analyst attribution. He declined. He submitted his resignation the same afternoon. It was accepted. Marcus Chen applied for a transfer to the West Coast office the following week. The transfer was approved. He sent Thomas a brief, professional email that said, "Good luck with the methodology project. Deserved." Thomas replied with 2 sentences. He meant both of them. The quarterly report was reissued with the corrected methodology, and Thomas Reeve named as the analyst of record. The recommendation it produced was significantly more conservative than the previous version. Helena presented it to the board. 2 board members pushed back on the conservatism. She showed them the methodology comparison. They went quiet. One of them said, "Who's the analyst?" She said, "Someone I'm glad we have." 4 weeks later, Thomas woke at 5. He did not fight it. He made coffee. He stood at the kitchen window. The apartment felt different than it had in September, not the apartment itself, which was the same, but his relationship to it. He had stopped thinking of it as temporary. He had put a photograph on the wall last week, one of Ella at the park the previous spring, laughing at something off camera. He had a second one ordered. He was deciding where it would go. Ella appeared at 6:30 in her pajamas, hair in its morning state, holding the new book she'd started Tuesday. She climbed onto her chair. She looked at him with the direct, affectionate assessment she deployed at the kitchen table. "You seem better," she said. "Better than what?" "Better than before." She poured her juice. "Before you seemed like you were carrying something. Now you seem like you put it down." He looked at his daughter. "When did you get so observant?" he said. "I've always been this observant," she said. "You just weren't paying attention to what I was observing." She opened her book. He made her eggs, the good kind, because it was a Thursday, and because she'd finished her ecosystem project, and because some mornings just warranted them. He thought about Helena Marsh's office last night. The plant, fully recovered, moved to a better light, and the chair she'd adjusted and the call she'd mentioned with her brother that had apparently gone well. He thought about a standing meeting she'd added to the calendar. Thursday mornings, 15 minutes. Strategy check-in, Thomas and Helena, no agenda, just the floor's actual state. He thought about the quality of her attention in those meetings, the same quality she'd had at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, stripped of performance. Just the real thing. He thought about the end of last Thursday's meeting, when she'd paused at the door and said, "Ella's ecosystem project. Did she turn it in?" And he'd said yes, and she'd said, "Did she get a good grade?" And he'd said the teacher had called it the most thorough diagram she'd seen in 3 years. And Helena had smiled, a real one, the kind that arrived without being arranged. He had found himself thinking about that smile on the drive home. He had noted this, and filed it under "not yet," which was the right place for things that needed the time they needed. The yet was shorter than it used to be. Ella looked up from her book. She looked at him with the patient attention of someone who had been watching something develop and was waiting to confirm it. "The CEO lady," she said. He looked at her. "Helena." "Helena," Ella said. She tried the name out. "Is she nice?" "She's honest," he said. "Which is better?" Ella considered this, the same framework he'd used before, which she'd heard and catalogued. "Like the woman in my book," she said. "The one who finds the pattern the adults missed." "Something like that," he said. Ella looked at her eggs, back at him. She had the expression of someone who had already reached a conclusion and was giving the situation a little more time out of courtesy. "Dad," she said. "Yeah." "You should invite her to dinner." He looked at his daughter. "Not yet," he said. "Why not yet?" "Because some things take the time they take." She ate a bite of her eggs. She looked at the ceiling briefly, in the way she did when she was performing patience at something. "Okay," she said. "But not too long." "Not too long," he agreed. She returned to her book. He drank his coffee. The morning moved at its own pace around them, the city starting up outside, the apartment doing what it did, the plant photograph on the wall waiting for its second companion. He thought about a 9 p.m. Tuesday, and a question asked sharply and an answer given plainly. He thought about a ceiling looked at for 2 seconds, and a plant watered, and a brother called, and a chair height adjusted. He thought about what it was to say the true thing with no agenda, and have it land where it needed to land. He had stayed because the work needed doing. That was the whole answer. It turned out that was enough to change everything.